Greetings and welcome to another episode of Veterans of the Cedar Valley. My name is Tom Haggerty, and over the past few shows we've tried to have veterans here from the various conflicts that they served in to tell us their story about their service time and what they experienced. Today we're going to have a little different spin on the show. I'm glad to have with us the Iowa State Director of the Selective Service System, Myron Lynn from Pella, Iowa. Welcome to the show, Myron, and I'm glad you were able to come up and visit with us. The Selective Service System is probably not well known unless you're like a 18-year-old male. Would that be correct?
Well, I've run into a lot of questions about that. In my role as the director of the Selective Service System in the state of Iowa, I've run into people who really don't have no contact with the Selective Service System. They don't have a son that's reaching the age of 18 or had somebody recently involved with the Selective Service System. It's not unusual to find people that don't know that we're in existence yet today.
Just to back up a little, we were visiting before the start of the show, and your career on your journey to become the Iowa State Director of the Selective Service. Tell me a little bit about your career up to this point.
Well, just very briefly, I served in the military service. Was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army in 1972, and served as an infantry officer in the United States Army. I actually served for a total of 25 years, including the last 11 in the Army Reserve. And while I was in the Army Reserve, I was actually assigned to the Selective Service Agency as a reserve officer. So then I retired in 1995.
And you told me previously also that you received a presidential appointment, or how did you receive the position of Iowa Director?
In 1995, when the current state director was leaving the role, and I was retiring from the armed services, the uniformed services, Governor Branstad contacted me and nominated me to assume that role going forward. So the gubernatorial nomination went to Washington, D.C. ultimately, and I was appointed by the Clinton administration.
And you've been in the position continuously since?
I have,
okay.
Yes.
Let's get back to what every 18-year-old male in the United States has to address this subject of registering for the Selective Service. First off, is that all that's required? Is that when they're 18 they have to register?
They must register. Every 18-year-old male, according to the Military Selective Service Act, every 18-year-old male is required by law to register within 30 days of his 18th birthday. Late registrations are not going to be rejected, but that is the law. Every 18-year-old male resident of the United States must register with the United States Selective Service System.
And how do you register when you turn 18 years old? What do you do?
Well, there are a couple ways. I would maybe classify this as one of the old methods. Is when you walk into your post office, you'll find typically Selective Service information on the shelves there, including a card that can be filled out and mailed in to register with the United States Selective Service System. It'll include a lot of information that will be detailed with the registrant. But over the years, we've made some efficiency improvements and given some other options for a young man to register with the Selective Service System. Most notably would have been about 15 years ago when we put together an opportunity to register online through a very secured network through the United States Selective Service System. So that's probably the best way for a young man to register today, is to do it online by going to www.sss.gov.
When I was in charge of the window section at the post office in Waterloo and Cedar Falls, we used to have to stock those cards for registration for the Selective Service, and One time I remember kind of comical that this person came in and filled out a card and thought it was a change of address card, and they quickly wanted to retrieve it and not register for the draft or for selected service. And I just stumbled on the word draft. Is this considered a draft registration, or we don't use that terminology anymore?
Well, the Selective Service System is designed, its mission is to provide the manpower pool to the Department of Defense in the case of a national emergency. And the process would be called, the draft, if you would, to put the young men into the United States Armed Services. But typically during a non-mobilization scenario like we're currently in, there is not a national emergency requiring the induction of men through the draft. We're referencing the Selective Service System.
Once you register as a 18-year-old male, how long are you on the Selective Service System's list?
Well, the process of, well, first of all, every young man between the age of 18 and 25 inclusive, and up to his 26th birthday, must be registered with the United States Selective Service System according to the federal law. And it's during that period from 18 through 25 that if there was a national emergency requiring a draft, that would be the period of perhaps the most likely opportunity for a man to be drafted and inducted into the United States Armed Services.
Okay, you mentioned online registration. Maybe, I'm not a data-driven person, but what's the most, are they registering more by going to the post office, or are they registering more online?
Well, the online opportunity to register is very popular among young people. I mean, you and I probably would do this in an analog way by filling out the piece of paper. But,
yes, yes.
But the use of the technology it's secure, and that is a very popular way for men to register.
So when you register by paper at the post office, or if you register online, what do you get that proves you registered? I mean, you hand that in to the clerk at the post office. Do they give you a receipt, or do you print out a receipt online?
The Selective Service System, once the information is received and placed into the system, will actually send a confirmation letter to the address that was provided in the registration. It's not like you and I had to do at one time to keep that card with you and in your wallet everywhere you went. But it certainly is a confirmation that you have registered, and it's worthy of keeping, whether it be in a safety deposit box or in some safe place to keep in your home, just in case you have to use it and show somebody at some time, like a college entry exam or something like that.
And again, when you register, you're not being given a quote-unquote draft number per se. You're just registering, right? There's no, I think when we had the draft, it was like number 1 to number 500, and when they drew your number, if it was a low number, you got drafted in the service. But you're just registering for the Selective Service in the event that there was a national mobilization required, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
You're not assigned any kind of a number that might be used for the Selective Service draft process. Now, you and I probably recall the lottery. Mm-hmm. that occurred back in 1969. I think that was the one that, well, you were already in the service at that point.
Yep.
But everybody that was subjected to the potential of being drafted remembers his draft number.
Yes.
and that was a date of birth lottery, and that's how it would work today as well. In the case of a national emergency, there would be a lottery, and it would determine the date of birth sequence that a young man would be subject to the draft.
And let me just clear up the misconception. Are young ladies required to register for the Selective Service when they turn 18?
The Military Selective Service Act only requires males between the ages of 18 and 25 to be registered with the Selective Service System. Now, with the difference in the mission of many of the combat missions that are perhaps going to be involved with the Department of Defense, there's some talk about the change to also require women to register. That'll be a decision made by Congress and by the President, and if a decision to include women to register is made, then the Selective Service System is prepared to do that.
But there's not been a national demand by women to be registered. They're just discussing it.
Well, in Congress, they're discussing that,
Okay.
and I'm sure that the members of Congress are probably hearing a thing or two about that.
What if I did not want to register, and my 18th birthday comes along, my 19th, my 20th? Who's going to say anything about it? What's the consequences?
Well, that's a good question. The consequences, I think there are twofold. Potentially, in the Military Selective Service Act, it is mandatory to register. And built into that Selective Service Act is our criminal penalties for failure to comply with the law. And those criminal penalties are very harsh. They're upon conviction of a felony of violating the Military Selective Service Act. The penalty is a 5-year federal prison sentence in a federal prison, and or up to a $250,000 fine. So it's up to 5 years of prison and or up to a $250,000 fine. That's if there's a prosecution and a conviction. Now, I also want to say before we move on to the other part of that is the Selective Service System is not in the law enforcement role. We provide the manpower pool, the names, and the information, and the structure for the young man to be inducted potentially in a draft. But we don't charge people with any crime. That would be exclusively the role of the United States Department of Justice.
So there's no selective service police force that's going to come and knock on anybody's door. It's just go ahead and register and get it over with, or there are penalties associated with it.
Well, those are Tom. Those are the criminal penalties. Now there are substantial non-criminal penalties that don't require a prosecution that a person could experience. If you fail to register, and you're required to do so by the law, you may not receive any federal grants, scholarships, loans, and so on for educational purposes. You may not have as an opportunity any federal employment. There are a number of states that have put into play a number of non-criminal consequences for men who haven't registered. Many cities also do the same.
We're almost at a halfway point on our program, Myron, and when we come back, I want to start discussing about membership on the Selective Service Board just a little bit, and then we'll go back into the Selective Service System itself. We're going to take a commercial break here to help pay the bills for the program, and we'll be right back with our second half. Please come back.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
We all know that the Cedar Valley is a great place to live and work. And there are many individuals and organizations that are doing their part to improve the quality of life for everyone that calls this their home. On Serving the Valley, we sit down with these service organizations to learn more about different projects and events that need your support. We all need to do our part to help out our community. Tune into Serving the Valley to learn more.
Welcome back to the second half of our show of the Veterans of the Cedar Valley. My name's Tom Haggerty. Today we've been discussing with the Iowa State Selective Service Director Myron Lind from Pella, Iowa, the Selective Service System, which requires 18-year-old males to register for selective service. Myron, just before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about the consequences of failing to register at your 18th birthday. There was something I read about driver's license and failure to register. Can you explain some of that?
Sure, and Iowa is one of many states that have put into place in the state law a connection between the renewal of a driver's license and the compliance with the Military Selective Service Act. And in the state of Iowa, in 2003, I worked with Governor Vilsack's office and in the legislative leaders in the state capitol. And we put together a bill that connects the driver's license renewal process to the registration process. So any young man who has reached the age of 18 and renews his driver's license in the state of Iowa will automatically be registered with the United States Selective Service System through that process.
Okay. I want to talk just a little bit about how the makeup of the Selective Service Boards are done. I served for a couple years on the District 3 local Selective Service Board, and then had the honor of being promoted to the District Appeals Board for the Selective Service. Tell us about the makeup of from like say maybe my position on a local board up to yours and then the rest of the nation. How do people get on one of these things?
Well, first of all, let me express great appreciation for you serving on that board, Tom. It's people like you that actually form the foundation of the United States Selective Service System. And what I probably should just clarify, the Selective Service Board that you serve on now and served previously is a different board than occurred back in the 1960s. Those boards in the 1960s and 70s actually chose the people, that chose the men that they wish to have drafted. That is no longer the case. The Selective Service Boards now just hear the appeals and the claims for deferments and exemptions and postponements for men who have already received a draft notice, which comes out of the database in the Selective Service System. So that's the role of the Selective Service Board today. In the state of Iowa, we have 135 Selective Service local board members, plus 10 district appeal board members. So 145 real people, real names, real faces, at least one in each county. And in the more populated counties like Polk County, we have 10 board members just right there in that county. When we're looking for to fill a vacancy in any of those counties, we'll try to find a person who is actively engaged in his or her community, is willing to serve and has the time to serve as a Selective Service Board member, is willing to do this in a fair and unbiased manner, and is representative of the people of the community. And so when we're seeking a replacement for a board member who has left the board, it could be through retirement or has moved on or wishes to just relocate. Those are the kinds of people that we're trying to find a replacement for. We will look for civic leaders in the community to make recommendations to us on who was the best person that you could find to place on the board. The process, again, is the governor will nominate, and ultimately it's a presidential appointment, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah, and yours was a presidential appointment as well.
Yeah, I got a nice certificate for it. And it wasn't about me not being able to shoot a rifle straight as a medic, but you know, for being a volunteer. But if somebody wanted to become involved on a selective service board, how do they contact you, or?
Yes, in fact, we keep a database of people who have made an inquiry about their willingness and their eagerness to serve. And if they wish to do that, they could certainly give me, contact me, and we'll be glad to keep that information on file. When there would become a vacancy in that county, that person would certainly be one of the first people we would look to.
Okay, and then on the role of the Selective Service Board, are they the ones that are going to say you're drafted, or they're just there to, what is their main purpose, the local board?
The local board does not make that selection about who is going to be drafted. Their role is to hear claims of people the men who have already received their draft notice. They've already taken their physical, passed the physical, received the draft notice, and have been told to report for induction. And then that person says, I fit one of these exemptions or deferments or postponements listed on the selective service information I have in front of me. I wish to apply for one of those. And that application process, the process goes through the local board system. Ultimately, the local board will hear those kinds of claims, and those claims could be conscientious objector claims, hardship claims, ministerial occupation claims, student of ministerial claims. Those are the kinds of claims that the local board would hear.
Can a person who registers for the Selective Service tell you right off the bat that they're a conscientious objector, or do they have to register and then come before the local board for a hearing?
There is no process in the system and in the military selective service law that allows a person to declare himself as a conscientious objector. The process is when the individual has received his draft notice and has completed his physical exam, and if he wishes at that point to declare himself as a conscientious objector, then that would go to the local board and we would be heard then.
One of the things that I remember in my training was that if you're in college, you mentioned this, you can get a deferment. If you're in a seminary, you can get a deferment. There's ministerial deferments, there's college deferments, conscientious objectors. So there are opportunities for people after they've registered for the Selective Service to file those claims. And can they always keep those claims? Like, I'm going to be a conscientious objector forever?
Well, if you're declared as a conscientious objector through the process heard by the Selective Service Board, as you probably recall, Tom, there are two levels of conscientious objectors. One who's opposed to serving in the military service in any role, and then there's another type of person who was opposed to serving in a combatant role. And if the board determines that the person is a conscientious objector in one of those two areas, then the one who is non-combatant role will still serve in the military service. The one who is a conscientious objector and is not going to serve in any role in the military service still has a requirement to serve in an alternative service role in the United States. So it would be in a more of a community service kind of role, and would be approved and supervised by the Selective Service system.
Okay, say that I go before a local Selective Service Board and I'm denied my request for conscientious objector status. Is that it?
It is not. The Selective Service System has 3 levels of hearing. There is the local board, which is the initial hearing of the Selective Service claim. If it is denied at that level, then there is a district appeal board review of the claim. In the state of Iowa, there are 2 district appeal boards, basically along the judicial divide between the north and the south. And a claim that is heard by the district appeal board can also be appealed to the national appeal board with some other requirements. At least one of those district appeal board members has to be in favor of the claimant's claim. If it is a unanimous claim in opposition, the process doesn't move any forward. It doesn't move forward to the National Appeal Board.
So it's nice to know that you're not up against an automatic denial when you go for an appeal or a request for a deferment. But we're nearing the end of the program. In Iowa, what's the compliance rate, just if it's a WAG that you can give me?
Sure. Actually, Iowa is one of the most compliant states. We really don't see or hear anything about an organized opposition, but we're almost at 100%. I think we're in the like a 99.8% compliance rate in the state of Iowa. And we're still reaching out for those that 2.2% to make sure that they hear from us.
Great. And finally, the requirements again for selective service registration is when you turn 18, or can you do this at 17? But when you're 18 years old as a male, you have to go to the post office and register by card or online. Correct?
That is correct, or renew your driver's license. That is correct.
Now, if somebody goes to renew their driver's license and they have not registered, they cannot get their driver's license renewed?
No, that's not the case.
Okay.
The driver's license will still be renewed, but the process then takes that information and automatically registers the individual with the Selective Service System.
Well, over the years since my time as an 18-year-old, when you had to draft or you could volunteer, that technically the draft has been discontinued. In the case of a national emergency, the call out will come up for Selective Service System to kickstart volunteer people into the military, and compliance will be yes or no on the part of that individual. Myron, I'd like to thank you for coming up today from Pella, Iowa, and joining us on the Veterans of the Cedar Valley. It was a different show, to say the least, but it's something I felt that the young men need to know about, and I appreciate your service and continued good luck in that. We've come to the end of our show, Veterans of the Cedar Valley. If you'd like to suggest a veteran who would like to share his experience with us on Veterans of the Cedar Valley, please get a hold of us or the cable studio personnel. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and please come back again on our next episodes. Thank you.